Sybil Lennox did not cry. She set the wedding band in the center of the housekeeping ledger. 8 months of her careful handwriting, every household expense recorded in the neat, deliberate hand of a woman who had brought her whole attention to this marriage. And she did not look at it again. She had heard Jasper in the study, every word, and now she was leaving. The summer of 1912 had come in slow and heavy over Harwick, Massachusetts. The kind of summer that pressed down on everything. On the elm-lined streets that curved toward the Mill District, on the river that ran silver at the edge of the Lennox property, on the women who moved through the big house in careful quiet, doing what was expected of them, without requiring acknowledgement. Sybil March had spent 8 months learning that particular quiet. She was 27 years old, the daughter of a country doctor who had died the previous January, and left her a leather case of medical texts, a nursing license, and a reputation among his colleagues for having hands steadier than most men twice her age. She had not known Jasper Lennox well before their engagement. She had met him 4 times. He was 33, reserved in the way that certain responsible men are reserved. Not cold, not deliberately withholding, but occupied by a private interior life he had never found occasion to share with anyone. He ran the Lennox textile concern with the quiet efficiency of a man who understood that good management was its own form of respect. He remembered details. He pulled out her chair. He asked after her interests, with the attentiveness of someone who had been told attentiveness was a virtue, and had taken the lesson seriously. He had never looked at her the way she had once seen a man look at a woman. That involuntary shifting of something in the chest, before the expression could be arranged. She had told herself that look was a thing from novels. She had told herself that steadiness and mutual respect were a better foundation than any feeling that arrived before thought could catch it. She had been telling herself a great many things. The dinner party was the following evening. Mrs. Lennox, Jasper's mother, a woman of architectural composure, had organized it with the specific purpose of demonstrating that the Lennox household was settled and arranged to her satisfaction. Sybil had prepared accordingly. A suitable dress, a suitable expression, a collection of pleasant things to say at appropriate intervals. She had become very skilled at suitable. She had gone to the library at 9:30 to retrieve a text she intended to read before bed. The house was quiet. She had assumed Jasper was in his office on the far side of the house. She pushed the library door open. He was there. Standing at the window with a glass of brandy he hadn't drunk, speaking to his cousin Reed, who was seated in the reading chair with the particular ease of a man who had known Jasper since boyhood, and asked him things no one else thought to ask. She seems settled enough, Reed was saying. It appears to suit her. A pause. She has adapted very well. Jasper's voice was careful, the voice of a man who has been thinking about something longer than he has admitted. She has stopped. He stopped. Started again. She is the most capable person I have ever brought into this house. I mean that precisely. High praise, Reed said. But not the whole of it. Silence. I don't believe I married for the reasons a man should marry, Jasper said finally. Not with cruelty. That was the thing that would stay with Sybil longest, through all the miles south and all the months that followed. Not with cruelty, with something closer to exhaustion. I told myself it wouldn't matter, that the arrangement made sense and sense was sufficient. Another pause. I find I was wrong about that, about what turns out to be sufficient. You mean you don't love her? The silence that followed was not long. 4 seconds, perhaps 5. Sybil counted each one in the shadow of the doorframe, one hand pressed flat against the wood, her breathing controlled the way her father had taught her. Slow, measured, keep your own fear quiet so someone else's can settle. I mean, Jasper said quietly, I'm not certain I know how. Sybil stepped back from the doorframe. She moved down the corridor without hurrying. Her hands were entirely steady. She had known, on some level, the same way a patient knows something about their own body before the diagnosis arrives and makes it language. Not because Jasper was unkind. He wasn't. He was considerate in the way that good, careful men are considerate. He had listened to her opinions at the dinner table. He had noticed when she was tired. He had been, in all measurable respects, a decent man doing the best he understood of a situation he had entered as much out of obligation as design. But he had never looked at her. Not really, not the way that cannot be managed. She went to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed for 4 minutes. She waited to see if grief was coming, the way you wait to see if rain will actually fall after the sky has changed. It did not come, not as grief. What came instead was clarity, clean and specific. the kind that has been assembling itself quietly for months, and only requires the right moment to arrive whole. She stood up and went to the wardrobe. She did not take everything. She took what was hers before this house, what had always been hers. Her father's medical case, the 3 texts inside it, earmarked on pages she'd been meaning to return to, her nursing license in its folder, and a letter she had been carrying in the bottom of the case since February. A letter from Dr. Sadie Colby of Providence, Rhode Island, a physician of 40 years standing who had written twice about a position at her women's clinic in the Mill District. The second letter said, "Your father trained you well. I am not getting younger. Come when you're ready. There is work here." She had kept that letter precisely because some quiet part of her had known, even then, that she might need it. She changed into her traveling dress. She moved without sound through the room. The house had settled into its late-night quiet. Downstairs, the grandfather clock in the foyer ticked with the deliberate unhurriedness of something that had been marking time in this house long before she arrived, and would continue long after. She lifted her wedding dress from the wardrobe. She folded it corner to corner the way her mother had shown her when she was 12, set it across the chair with both hands, smoothing each fold flat. Then she looked at her wedding band. A simple gold ring, plain, chosen by Mrs. Lennox from a family jeweler in Boston. Sybil had worn it for 8 months. She had looked at it every morning and told herself it meant what she needed it to mean. She slid it from her finger. She crossed to the kitchen table where the housekeeping ledger sat in its usual place. 8 months of her handwriting, coal deliveries, household accounts, staff wages, pantry inventory, the whole quiet architecture of a life she had been managing with both hands. She opened the ledger to the current page and placed the ring in the center of it. She did not leave a note. There was nothing she wanted to say that a note could carry without making it smaller than it was. She picked up the medical case. She walked to the door. She turned back once, not from doubt, but the way you turn back to look at a room you are leaving for the last time, because the instinct to remember is its own form of respect. She stood in the doorway for 3 seconds. Then she turned and did not look back again. The station in Harwick ran an early milk train south at 5 in the morning. The station master was a man named Grover, who had known her father, and did not ask unnecessary questions. He took her fare with a single raised eyebrow that settled when she met it steadily. On the train, a young woman of perhaps 17 sat across from her, watching with the barely contained curiosity of someone who has many questions, and is deciding which one to lead with. "Are you running away from something?" the girl finally asked, somewhere past the 2nd mile. Sybil considered it. "No," she said, "I'm running toward something." "Is that a better way to put it, or just a nicer one?" "Both," Sybil said. "It's also the true one." The girl seemed to find this sufficient and went back to the window. Dr. Colby's clinic was on Ellery Street, 2 blocks from the Providence waterfront, in a building that smelled of carbolic soap and dried herbs and the particular mineral sharpness that Sybil recognized from her father's office. The smell of a place where serious work was done. Dr. Colby herself was 71, sharp-eyed and compact, with hands that had begun to tremble slightly, which she managed by keeping them occupied. She looked at Sybil for a long moment when she arrived, still in her traveling clothes, medical case over one shoulder. "You're thinner than I expected," Dr. Colby said. "It was a long night. Sit down. There's bread on the counter and coffee on the stove." She waved toward the back of the clinic. "We can talk about what you know and what you don't after you've eaten. Decisions made on an empty stomach are made poorly." Sybil almost smiled. "I'm not here to make decisions. I'm here to work." "That," Dr. Colby said, turning back to her ledger, "is exactly the right answer. Sit down." In the weeks that followed, Sybil learned the shape of her new life with the same methodical attention she had always brought to learning anything. Dr. Colby's clinic served the Eastern Mill District, textile workers, and washerwomen, and wives of dock laborers, women who came in with injuries deferred and fevers allowed to run too long, because stopping to address them had not been something they could afford. Sybil had grown up with patients like these. She knew how to talk to them, not past them, not at a level designed to reassure rather than inform, but straight and plain, the way her father had. Within 2 weeks, Dr. Colby had stopped supervising her rounds. Within a month, she had started leaving the harder cases for Sybil. While she attended to the paperwork, her hands could still manage. "You have your father's steadiness," Dr. Colby told her one evening. "That's not taught. It's built over years, usually years that include more loss than a person would choose. He taught me to breathe through it." "Smart man. A comfortable pause settled between them. "Do you want to tell me why you're here? The whole of it?" Sybil dried her hands at the basin. "I'm here because you offered me work." "True, and not sufficient." She looked at the older woman. "When I'm ready," she said. Dr. Colby nodded once and went back to her ledger. Sybil appreciated that more than she could have said at the time. Back in Harwick, the talk had started within hours. Jasper moved through it with the particular stillness of a man walking very carefully through a room where something has shattered, trying not to cut himself on the pieces he hasn't found yet. To anyone who asked about Sybil's departure, he said the same thing. "She made her decision. I respect it." He said it until it stopped sounding like an answer and started sounding like something he was telling himself. His niece Pippa was 10 years old and had been living at the Lennox house while her parents were posted abroad. She was small for her age, and quiet in the way people mistake for shyness, when it is in fact something closer to precision. She only spoke when she had something worth saying, which meant that when she spoke, it counted. She had adored Sybil from the first afternoon, when Sybil had sat with her in the garden for 2 full hours explaining the difference between a healing herb and an ornamental one, and what the body's immune response actually was, and why certain things happened the way they did inside a person. All of it answered in language that assumed Pippa was capable of understanding, rather than needing to be simplified for. She began writing to Sybil in September. She had found the Providence Clinic's address on an envelope in the study, the second letter from Dr. Colby, which Jasper had kept but not acted on. Pippa did not ask permission. She simply wrote. Sybil wrote back. She answered every question. Pippa asked about the herb garden she was tending and the spider she was observing on the garden wall and the anatomical diagram she had found in one of Sybil's old journals and could not stop thinking about. She answered seriously, with the full weight of her attention. Jasper found the return letters on Pippa's desk in November, quite by accident, and read them without deciding to. He read them twice. Then he went downstairs and sat at his own desk, and stayed there for a long time. He wrote to Sybil the following week. The letter was formal. Correct. It read like a business communication from a man who had decided to do the right thing and was executing it with the efficiency he applied to all things. She wrote back. She was well. Providence suited her. The correspondence continued, careful and factual on both sides. But something in it began to shift. He wrote things he had not decided in advance were worth saying. She replied with things she had not filtered. By December, their letters had the quality of two people who had established, through distance and necessity, a way of being honest with each other that neither of them had managed when they were under the same roof. In January, Pippa got sick. It started the way these things start. A wet afternoon she hadn't mentioned, a chill she had dismissed as ordinary. By the 4th day she was feverish. By the 7th day the fever had not broken, and there was a rash developing that Dr. Garfield, the Harwick physician, was monitoring with the specific expression of a man who is not yet alarmed but is beginning to become so. "I would want a second opinion," Dr. Garfield told Jasper in the corridor outside Pippa's room, his voice low. "There is a clinic in Providence I have heard well of. Dr. Colby's practice. Her associate has had particular results with cases presenting this way this season." Jasper looked at him. "Her associate," he said. "Yes, a Mrs. Lennox, though her working name is March." Dr. Garfield paused, reading something in Jasper's expression. "You know her?" "Yes," Jasper said, "I do." He went back into Pippa's room and sat beside her. She was barely awake, her color too high, and she looked smaller than usual, which was its own kind of fear. "Is it bad?" she said. "We don't know yet." She was quiet for a moment. "If it gets worse," she said, "you should go get Sybil. She'd know what to do." Her eyes closed. "She always knows what to do." He sat with her until she was asleep. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. He sat and listened to it, and somewhere in the middle of that listening, he understood what he was going to do. He had understood it before she said it, if he was honest. He had understood it for longer than that. He made the journey to Providence in a day and a half, pushing hard, eating without tasting anything. Because every hour on the road was an hour he was not doing something useful, and usefulness was the only thing he had left to offer. He had sent a letter ahead. Brief: "Pippa is ill. I am coming to ask for your help. I understand if you cannot. I am coming anyway." He arrived at Ellery Street in the early afternoon, climbed down from the coach, and stood in front of the clinic door for exactly long enough to take one breath. Then he knocked. Sybil opened it. She was in her work clothes, a plain dark dress. her hair pinned back with the efficient practicality of a woman who stopped thinking about her appearance at 8 o'clock in the morning because there were more important things to think about. She had a pen in one hand and the marks of the morning on both. She looked, he thought, entirely and completely herself. He had not understood, until standing in front of her now, how different that was from the version of herself she had been in his house, and how much of the difference he was responsible for. "Pippa is sick," he said. "I need your help." Something moved across her face, not softening, exactly, but a reorganization of priority. The specific reorganization of a person who has just heard a child's name attached to illness. "Tell me everything," she said. "Come in and tell me everything from the beginning." He told her. He was thorough. She listened without interrupting, a small notebook open, her pen moving in the quick, economical strokes of someone capturing information in real time. When he finished, she looked at her notes. Then she looked at him directly. "How long has she had the rash?" 3 days. "Is it spreading?" Dr. Garfield said it had progressed to her trunk. She made a note, closed the notebook. "I need to see her." "I came to ask." "I'm not asking you to ask," she said. "I'm telling you I need to see her. How soon can you have a return coach arranged?" He blinked. "Tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning is fine. She was already moving to the supply shelves, beginning an inventory with the focused speed of someone who has arrived at a working hypothesis and intends to move on it. They left before dawn the following morning. Sybil had packed a leather case with the specific compounds she required, moving through the clinic in the last hour of darkness with the focused efficiency of a person who knows exactly what she might be walking into and intends to be ready for it. She returned to Harwick the way she had left, without ceremony, without announcement. She went directly upstairs. Pippa was awake, and the look on her face when she recognized the figure in the doorway was not dramatic. It was simply relief, direct and unmanaged, and entirely 10 years old. "You came," Pippa said. "Of course I came." Sybil sat on the edge of the bed and examined her with the same careful attention she gave every patient. Unhurried, thorough, asking questions in a tone so ordinary that Pippa answered them without anxiety. Jasper stood back and watched. He was aware of several things at once, which was not usually how he was in a room. He was aware of how much had changed since June, and how little of it he had noticed happening, and how visible all of it was to him now. Mrs. Lennox appeared in the doorway 10 minutes later. She looked at Sybil seated at the bedside, at the medical case open on the floor, at the small notebook in Sybil's hand. She did not speak for a long moment. "Mrs. Lennox," Sybil said without looking up. "Dr. March," Mrs. Lennox said, correcting herself precisely, without fuss. "How is she?" "Better than I feared. The rash is scarlatinal. I want to treat the fever aggressively over the next 4 days, and I have what I need." Sybil looked up. "She is strong. You have raised a resilient child." Mrs. Lennox looked at her steadily. "She raised herself largely. I provided the structure." "That is also raising someone well," Sybil said. A pause. The two women regarded each other with the attention of people who have things to say and have decided this is not yet the moment to say them. "I intend to stay until she is stable," Sybil said, "if that is acceptable." "Of course," Mrs. Lennox said. "Of course it is." The Whitmore Charitable Gala was held on the 3rd Saturday of October at the Harwick Assembly Hall. An annual gathering of the town's significant families, the kind of event that operated in a specific register of formal ease. Mrs. Lennox had been involved in its organization since August, and it was the occasion she had identified, quietly and without announcing it, as suitable for introducing Jasper to Miss Pryor of the Pryor Mill family, whose father had expressed interest in a social connection that might usefully precede a business alliance. Jasper had known this. He had known what he intended to do about it for some time. He arrived with his mother, which was expected. He moved through the room with the surface fluency of a man who had attended events like this since boyhood. Sybil was seated at the far end of the hall with Dr. Colby, who attended every year and considered it tolerable entertainment. Jasper located her table within the first 10 minutes. He did not approach it. The formal portion of the evening began at 9. Several announcements were made. Then the chairman looked toward the Lennox table with the anticipatory expression of a man who has been told there is one more announcement forthcoming. "I believe Mr. Lennox has something to share," he said. Jasper stood. The room settled. "I had intended this evening to serve as the occasion for a particular announcement," he said. His voice carried without him raising it. "I find that I am making a different one." The room was entirely quiet. Several months ago, a woman named Sybil March left this community. She left because she was in possession of honest information about her own situation, and she responded to that information with the intelligence and integrity she brings to everything she does. The difficulty that followed was not of her making. It was of mine. I should have said so publicly sometime before tonight. I am saying it now. He did not look at Sybil's table. He had made that decision beforehand. This was not a performance directed at her. I also want to say that I will not be formalizing any engagement this evening, or at any foreseeable time. The Pryor family is a fine one, and Miss Pryor deserves a partner who has chosen her specifically and freely. The same thing everyone in this room deserves, including people who are not in this room. The chance to be seen clearly by someone who is actually looking. He paused. That is all I wanted to say. Thank you for your patience. He sat down. The silence held for 4 seconds, then it broke. Sybil found him in the corridor behind the hall 20 minutes later. She was standing against the wall with her arms at her sides, and the expression of a person feeling several large things and working through them in order. You didn't look at me, she said, when you were speaking. No. Why not? He stood a few feet away. Because it wasn't for you. I told you it wouldn't be. A pause. It was honest, she said. Yes. A longer silence. The corridor was cool, and the noise of the room was muffled through the closed door, and the October air came through a window at the far end with the sharp clarity of a season changing. What you said, she said, about everyone deserving to be seen clearly by someone who is actually looking. She stopped. Did you arrive at that beforehand? No, he said. I found it when I stood up. I've noticed lately that's easier, finding the true thing when I need it. I don't know exactly when that changed. I do, she said, and then after a moment, I can at least guess. He looked at her. I am not asking you for anything tonight. I want you to understand that. He paused eventually. Not tonight, not in a corridor after a speech in front of this room. I would like to ask for the chance to demonstrate something over time, by actions. That is all I am asking. She looked at him for a long time. The evidence is better than it was, she said. I want to be precise about that. It is better. I don't know yet if it's complete. I understand. My work in Providence is mine, she said, fully. Whatever else happens or doesn't happen, that is not a variable. No, he said immediately. It never should have been. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. Come to Providence, she said, in January. Not now. When I've had enough time to see whether what I'm feeling is actual evidence or the relief of a public gesture. January, he said. Don't mistake my saying that for a decision. I won't, he said, but I will be there. He came to Providence in January, on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly when he said he would. Sybil opened the clinic door. She looked at him for a moment, then she stepped back. Come in, she said. Don't touch anything. He sat in the chair by the front window while she returned to the counter and the compounding she had been in the middle of. She did not perform the working for him. She simply worked, with the absorbed efficiency of someone who knows exactly what she is doing and finds satisfaction in the doing of it. He had watched her work before, in Pipa's room, in the clinic on Ellery Street. It had not become ordinary. He did not think it would. The roof on your father's house, she said without turning around. On Calder Street. Mr. Finch mentioned it had been repaired last autumn. He was very careful not to tell me who had commissioned it, which is how I knew it wasn't him. Jasper was still. I looked into it, she said. I should have told you directly, he said. I didn't want you to feel obligated to respond to it in any particular way. I was doing it because the roof was leaking and it's your house. That's the whole of it. She turned to look at him. Going forward, she said, tell me. Not because I need to approve, but because I want to know what you're doing and why. That's what it means to actually see someone. Yes, he said. You're right about that. Dr. Colby appeared from the back room, took in the situation with the swift glance of a woman who has seen everything, retrieved her coat from the hook by the door, and said, without pausing, house call. Sybil, the morning compound needs another hour. Mr. Lennox. She looked at him once, a brief, encompassing look that communicated several things without using words for any of them. Stay as long as you're useful. The door closed behind her. The clinic was quiet. Sybil came around the counter. She set a notebook on the examination table between them. Not her compounding notebook, a different one, smaller, worn at the corners in the way of something used constantly. I want to show you something, she said. He leaned forward. When Dr. Colby retires, and she intends to, her hands won't permit another winter of full practice. She has asked me to take on the clinic, the lease, the patients, the name on the door. She opened the notebook. It was dense with notes and small diagrams and careful figures. But I have been thinking for 6 months about what it should become. Not just what it is. He looked at the pages. A women's health clinic, she said. Not exclusively, anyone who came would be treated. But designed specifically to serve women in the Mill District who cannot access care because they cannot afford it, or because the care available treats them as secondary concerns. Women who come in having been sick for months before they stopped, because stopping was a luxury they couldn't afford. She paused. There is a building on Cabot Street, large enough for 2 examination rooms and a proper dispensary. It is for sale. He looked up from the notebook. I am telling you this, she said, because you asked for the chance to show me something over time, and I am deciding, carefully, whether that chance has been earned. And because what I am building is not something I need funded as a gift or managed by someone else. But if you want to understand what my life actually is, this is it. He looked at the notebook. He looked at her. This is the most important work in this city, he said. I mean that without qualification. He paused. Tell me what it needs. Not what you need from me, what it needs to become what you've designed. She watched him. The building on Cabot Street, she said. An investment, not a gift. In writing, with terms. My clinic, my decisions, my name on the door, yours nowhere on it unless I put it there. You would be a financial partner in a medical concern that makes no promise of return. I understand what I'm investing in, he said. I've read the notebook. That's sufficient. She looked at him for a long moment. You haven't seen the building. No, he said. But I've seen the notebook, and I've seen you work. That tells me more than any building would. The quiet that followed was different from the previous ones. It had a different density, the quality of something that has been building for a long time and has just found its level. He came back in the spring. He came back because he had meant every word he had said in January, and because the months between had not softened his certainty but clarified it. The way time clarifies things that are real, rather than things that are only convenient. He asked her on a morning in April, in the narrow back garden of the clinic, where she had been sitting with a cup of coffee and her father's notebook, reading in the early light, before the first patients arrived. I want to marry you, he said. He sat down beside her on the garden bench and said it plainly, without arranging it first. Not because it resolves something, or because it is sensible. Because I want to be your partner in the specific meaning of that word. Because your work is the most important thing I have encountered, and I want to be close enough to it to understand it, and be there, when it is hard. Because I want to be the person who knows at any given moment what you are building and cares whether it succeeds. Because every room I have been in since June has been missing something I could not identify until I identified it, and it was you. She was quiet. There are conditions, she said. Name them. The clinic is mine. Every decision in it is mine. The building on Cabot Street, when we secure it, is in my name. Yes. Providence is our home. You come to Harwick when your business requires it. I come when it matters to you. We negotiate the rest as it arises. Yes. Pippa visits whenever she wants, she said, and something in her voice shifted slightly on that one. Truer, somehow, than the others. She has questions that deserve real answers. I intend to be the person who gives them. She will be more than glad, he said. That is an understatement. A silence. You understand, she said, looking at her hands and then back at him, that I am not doing this because I forgive you. Forgiveness is not the right word for what this is. I am doing it because the evidence has become sufficient to suggest that the man who said he didn't know how to love was not a finished man, that he has been doing the work of becoming someone else. She paused. That is different from forgiveness. In some ways it is more. I know, he said. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for exactly what you described. She looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. Yes. It was not dramatic. It was simply true, the way the most important things tend to be. She was quiet for another moment. Then, you will need to be in a room with me, and not feel you have arrived somewhere. The work doesn't stop because we have decided something. I know, he said. I would not have it stop. Good, she said, and picked up her coffee, and looked at the garden, and let the morning be what it was. The clinic opened on the first Monday of June. March Women's Health Clinic. S. March, M.D., The painted letters on the glass of the Cabot Street door sharp and clean in the early summer light. Pippa had insisted on supervising the painting, which had taken place the previous Thursday, and had done so with the focused authority of a child who takes matters of record seriously. Mrs. Lennox had written a letter. A stiff, careful letter, which was exactly what could have been expected, and rather more than Sybil had allowed herself to anticipate. It said she was glad Sybil was well and that the work sounded meaningful. It said nothing further, but it had been written and sent, and Sybil had read it twice and set it in the drawer where she kept her father's letters, which was not an accident, and not something she examined too closely. Jasper made the tea each morning. He had learned how she took it, not because she had told him, but because he had watched her make it for herself enough times to know, which was itself a form of paying attention, the small ongoing practice of it, the kind that did not announce itself. He brought it through to the back room and set it beside her notebook, without saying anything. She glanced at it, glanced at him. "Thank you," she said. "Of course," he said, and went back to the front room and his own correspondence at the small desk by the window, the one Dr. Colby had quietly vacated without being asked. The first patient arrived at 8 o'clock. Sybil came through from the back room, greeted her, and led her through the door. Jasper heard the low, careful register of her voice from where he sat, the particular tone she used when someone was frightened and needed to be met where they were, not where it was convenient for them to be. He looked at the window, at the name on the glass, reversed from where he sat, readable from the street. He went back to his letters. This was not arrival. He understood that now, arrival was the word people reached for when something had concluded, and this was not a conclusion. This was a life being built by two people who had each been changed by the year between, still assembling itself, still asking things of both of them, still requiring the ongoing practice of honesty that neither of them had been capable of in the same house 8 months ago. That was what a real partnership was, he had come to understand, not a destination, an ongoing, imperfect, necessary choice. He had been wrong about many things. He was working, with both hands, not to be wrong about this one. In the back room, Sybil listened. The window was open. The morning was beginning. The clinic on Cabot Street opened its doors to the first day of June 1913, exactly as she had always known, somewhere underneath the months of careful silence, and the long road south, and all the difficult necessary work that followed, it would. She had carried that knowledge folded in the bottom of a leather case since February of the year before. She had kept it safe and waited for the moment she could set it on the table and say, "Here, this is what I came toward. This is what running towards something looks like when you finally arrive." The door was open. The work was good. And she was entirely, precisely, on every term she had ever required, exactly where she had chosen to be.